July, the heat was off here. I mean, the air was off here. We couldn't have a meeting. And January, we got snow iced out. So I got up this morning and said, oh, hell, it's raining. Hope we don't get flooded today. But anyway, since I last saw y'all, a whole lot has gone on. I'm going to bring you up to date with some updates here. So I'm going to read it right the screen as best I can. 2 updates since our last High Bridge meeting last May. Since our last meeting featuring the early history of High Bridge, an unexpected amount of new history has come to light. Many of you know from time to time on Facebook I've been posting old construction photos of High Bridge, just picking some every now and then to keep the interest up. I also posted photos and information about Mr. Willis Vale that is credited with taking many of the 1913, 1914 construction photos at High Bridge. Mr. Vale worked for the railroad and took many photos. By chance, some of those photos caught the attention of Mr. Ken Tower that lives near Lynchburg, Virginia. Ken contacted me on Facebook and advised me of his family connection to Mr. Willis Vale. I had no idea. I don't think anybody of us knew this connection. I know Bob Flippin didn't. Mr. Vale, while building railroad bridges near Lynchburg in 1906, 1907 era, had met his great aunt, who would later become Mr. Vale's future bride. So Mr. Vale came back, or he met this lady because he built a bridge across this lady's property. In 1906, 1907, he happened to rent a house on her property. And that was 1906, 1907. Well, it was 1922 before he ever came back and married her. So I don't know what took them so long, but they finally got hooked up. And from what I can tell, that was the only time either one of them got married. Ken Towler's great aunt was the lady that married Mr. Vale. Vale was working for the railroad, and he had constructed a bridge across Ken Towler's family farm in the period of 1906 1907. Willis Vale had rented a house across Ken Towler's family farm in the period 1906-1907. Willis Vale had rented his house and was located between Beaver Creek and Opossum Creek. Now I've got 3 different spellings of Possum Creek. I don't know which one is right, but anyway, they spelled it with an O there. The railroad was building trestles for construction of the Lynchburg Belt Line. Now, this Lynchburg Belt Line connected to the track right here, went on up through here to Pamplin, Appomattox, Concord, and the next stop was this Opossum Creek place. The railroad was building trestles for the Lynchburg Belt Line. Ken Tower shared some of the family photos and information that he has there in Lynchburg. Ken still lives on the old family farm, and the bridge still runs across the family farm. The property is located in the general area behind Moore's Country Store on Highway 460. I think most of y'all know where Moore's Country Store is. It's about a mile behind there, I would say. There's a lot of roads going up to Oxford Furnace Hill, and you see these roads that cut off to your left when you're going into Lynchburg. They all go back in there where this guy's farm is. But also, have an update on the Vale negatives. But 19 years ago, when High Bridge Trail was being built, it was discovered that 85 Vale negatives showing the 1913, 1914 construction of High Bridge were up for sale on eBay. The glass negatives were known as the Vale negatives because Mr. Vale took the pictures. The officials at High Bridge State Park asked Bob Flippin to purchase them and have them shipped to Farmville from New Mexico. Found out that these, Mr. Vale was from New Jersey, Quakertown, New Jersey. Evidently, when he retired, he took all his collection of negatives back to New Jersey, and when he died, they were stored in a barn out near the back of his house, I understand. Anyway, it was almost 70 years later that they were discovered in this barn, and they started trying to sell them a few at a time, and they weren't getting anywhere. So whoever had found them, I guess it was family, they got in touch with this collector out in New Mexico. The collector flew over to Quakertown, New Jersey, hired a private plane and loaded 3,000 pounds of glass negatives in that plane and drove it straight back to New Mexico. And Bob got up with that guy through eBay. If y'all remember, Bob was all over eBay about that time. So he then purchased for a group in town. They were called, how is it here? The copies were used to produce, let me see here. The total purchase price of the negative was around $2,000 for these 85 glass negatives. The group, and some of you may be a member of the Friends of High Bridge, they got together $2,000 and gave it to Bob, told him to buy the negatives and get them shipped here. When they came, I don't know who here, but Bob probably, tomorrow Earl had them digitized, copied them before he gave them to somebody else. He gave them to the state park officials who were then building High Bridge. So the original negatives that were purchased, High Bridge sent them out to Southwest Virginia, and then the Railroad Museum out there. But Bob has these digital copies, and about 18 months ago, I conned him into giving me copies of them. He had kind of kept them close to his vest for many, many years. And I said, come on, Bob, give them to me. I said, look at those pictures that are in this book. They're not so hot. I said, I can take those pictures and make them brighter, get all the imperfections out of them, and I can colorize them. So he finally gave in and gave them to me. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. But these negatives, when they arrived, and the ones that are still for sale out on the internet, they were placed in cardboard and paper sleeves, and the guy that took the pictures, he put on there like the camera settings, the weather. He gave every one of them a number. Some of them have a time of day, all kinds of useful information. So in the last year and a half, I was able to get all the 85 and figure out the dates the pictures were taken. Then I made a database, I guess you would call it, on a spreadsheet on Excel, and I put all the negatives in the right order in which they were taken. That way, I could then see in what order everything happened. So now we know like what came first, what they did second, and so on. And I found that many of the, I guess you would say, contractors, there were 2 and 3 different projects there at the same time going on, and they were able to finish the project in 15 months. But of those 85, like I said, I have copies of them now. But I noticed with our copies that we have, the numbers ran from number 10 all the way up to 1,863. So I said, we only got 85, I wonder where the other 1,500 or so went. So in the last month or two, I've been looking on eBay and watching for them. They're still, putting pictures of them up, and they're on eBay still. I now have collected 400 more of these negatives. I haven't processed them yet. So tonight and next month, we're going to be looking at the original 85. maybe another year or so I'll have time to work up some of the other pictures. But I figured out that this Mr. Vale, he was contracted by the railroad to come to each place where they're building a bridge or tracks. And he wouldn't just stay at that one place. The railroad might call him. When he was here at High Bridge, he was getting called to go to Florida. He had to go to Southwest Virginia. He had to go wherever they needed him that week, and then he would come back to High Bridge. But we kind of now have a good idea of how they built it and basically what order. But I'm going to give you a quick rundown about Mr. Vale and the Lynchburg stuff that just came in, and then we'll get right to Farmville construction. That was Willis Vale, and like I said, he was here. He was in Lynchburg in 06 and 07, and then he came down here in Farmville on a separate job here in 13 and 14. Last month we were supposed to celebrate July we were going to celebrate the 110th anniversary of the opening of the current bridge, but like I said, we couldn't have the meeting, so we canceled the order for the birthday cake, and that was that. Maybe next year we'll do the 111th. But anyway, that's Willis Vale. There's another picture of him. He was raised as a Quaker, and he was born in Quakertown, New Jersey, which is Franklin Township, in 1868. He was a chief engineer for the railroad. Basically, he oversaw the contractors at each site. I got into the pictures of his home, and I also found this picture of the barn out back. Not sure, but this might be the actual barn where they found his slides in. I don't know, but that's one of the Vale barns. Here's three different pictures we have of Mr. Vale, and these two on the outside were both taken at High Bridge. So here's a fairly young man when he was here at High Bridge. Here's a picture of him on the left and his sister, Evangeline Vale, and she often traveled with him. There's a old family picture of the Vales family. I don't see him in that picture, but here's a picture of a picnic they evidently were having, and there's Willis Vale over here by the yellow arrow at the picnic. We had never seen this picture before until a few weeks ago. Here he is with a group of other people at one of the work sites. There he is right there, the yellow arrow over him. There's a picture that was taken out in the western part of the United States, and you see a little string right there. He was famous for setting his camera up, then going way away, and then when he got ready to take the picture, he'd pull his string and take his picture. You can see the actual string in this picture. This was, I think, Crater Lake. There he is with the string in his hand. There's his sister who was traveling with him. And in this picture, you can also, can't see it as good, but he has a string around his finger right there. Self-portrait. These were some family pictures that I was able to scramble up. There he is at one of his work desks. Each place he went, these work sites, they had an office for him to be in. There he is at one of his offices. For those who don't know, Quakertown, New Jersey is north of Philadelphia, kind of between New York and Philadelphia. There's a school he went to, and they now have a plaque on that school building in his honor. There it is again. Here's an actual picture of the house they grew up in on the left, and it was evidently the people that lived, well, next door they ran a little country store, and I kind of don't have any proof, but I kind of feel like his family had something to do with that business next door. And there's this terrible picture, but you can see that was a negative, and you can see it was number 371 he took. in 1891, you'll see there's a better picture of his house, and I think that's taken from the back. There's another picture of his house over here on the left and the store, same picture. There's a store shot with his house in the background. Store again, store again, store again. There's a picture of a horse and buggy in front of his house. Don't know who that child is, but there again, there's his house right there. That's his home today. It's been cleaned up, and I think it might be like a historical site there now. There's the barn again. There's a snow scene. And when he came to High Bridge, he was known as the man with the camera. He took approximately 85 pictures when he was in the Farmville High Bridge area. He also kept a daily diary, and we have a copy of that now, typed out and dated. We won't go into that, but we do have it. There's a picture of it. There's a picture of one of his offices that I was able to get off the internet, and you can see that's the actual negative, and then I turned it into that picture right there. So everywhere he went, he had other people working with him for the railroad. There's an example of how the actual negatives looked that Bob was able to buy off the internet. Okay. So this just tells here that like I told you before, the negatives are numbered. They were stored in paper envelopes, and the envelopes have a lot of information on them. And we were able to find out that they ran from number 1 to at least 1863, and it just quit. And I tried to do some inquiring, like why did he quit a year or two after he left Farmville? The only logical thing we could come up with is about that time the glass negatives were going out of style, and they were using celluloid negatives, and so he probably got an updated camera and no longer needed to do the glass negatives, probably while they got sent home and stored. But of the, so we know there were probably at least 1863, maybe more, and we now have 472 of them. Probably more than anybody else in the United States has in one place. Glass plates were used from the 1850s to the 1920s. After that, they went to other formats. Here's an example of one of the envelopes that the negatives were stored in. As you can see, it has a negative number and then all kinds of other information on there. And he used envelopes that he got in the mail and cut them in half and used them to store the pictures in, the negatives in. There's another example of stuff he recorded. There's another different type of negative pouch he was using, and this was like number 104. He had photographed a coal tipple on the big branch or something. Creek, okay, yeah. Took me a while to figure that out the first time. October 28th, 1891, 11:20 or so a.m. But I didn't know what a coal tipple was. Did y'all? You see those?
I do.
She did. Anyway, here's a picture of it. Evidently it was this building, and they would roll the train cars under there, and then the coal would come out on a conveyor of some type and drop down into the coal cars. So that would be basically a loading station to load the train cars. And all these train cars full of coal would come down out of West Virginia, come on down through Roanoke, Lynchburg, right by here, and all the way to, I guess, Norfolk area. Okay. Here's how I was able to find all these extra negatives. There's a place on there called Worth Point, and it shows the negative. And then I was able to go in here and capture that picture and blow it up and make a bigger picture. for 85 pictures. I got almost 300 and some more for nothing, except a little effort. There's a cold tip. Okay. I was also curious once I got all these negatives, where did he travel to take all these pictures? Because I knew he took a lot in Virginia, so I got me a map like you see there, and I plotted out where each negative was from. You can see basically he was on this eastern seaboard and then the western side of the United States. And he went across the bottom half of the United States from like New Orleans over to the East Coast. But this was from 1890 to 1915. And I'm guessing he hopped the train to go to all these places. He probably could ride free, but I don't know. I wanted to know where he took the most pictures. Well, come to find out, 154 were taken in Virginia, and then it went on down to just a few in some of the other states. All this stuff is going to be on the internet, so you can study it later. We'll skip over that one. But here's where I got information from this, I forgot his name now. Anyway, the man in Lynchburg. He says the lady at Maryville was his great aunt. She lived in the house that he now lives in. He took the picture yesterday. Come to find out, Vale's wife is buried up at Lynchburg. She didn't get buried where her husband got buried. And he said he was 8 years old when they held her funeral, which was 1959, so he's just a few years younger than I am. There's her gravestone up there at Lynchburg on the farm, Leila Bell Goff, wife of Willis Vale. And this information was forwarded to me from Lynchburg too. They were building what they call, I guess, the belt line, and it went from here up through Hampton, Appomattox, Concord, and when it got to Lynchburg, it veered off to the left and went around that side of Lynchburg, where there was already another line going in, and you could get that line went to downtown Lynchburg, and all that track's still up there today if you can go down and look at it. Anyway, I'm not going to read all that, but there it is. All the slides were taken near Lynchburg in 1906 and 1907. The reason I'm showing them tonight is you're going to see how much they look like the slides that also were taken in Farmville, just 7, 8 years apart. But here we go. There's Possum Creek Trestle. There's a blown up picture of it. That looks exactly like the high bridge there. And then there's another picture and the information right there that you can read. And there they are coming on out with it. And this structure here below, substructure, is that what you call it, Rich? The trestles, that they look very similar to the ones in here at High Bridge. Of course, the same railroad building, so they naturally they look alike. But there's the bridge they're building up there. And this says right here, Little Beaver Culvert Construction. I don't know exactly where that is along the line, but it's probably where it went around Lynchburg. That's a good picture of it. There's another picture over at Little Beaver Culvert. Better picture. Now this steam shovel right here looks exactly like the one that we have pictured down here at High Bridge. Take a good look at that, and I'll show you the other one taken at High Bridge a little later on. There's a close-up picture of it. And there's a picture, this picture of course was taken back in the 50s maybe, when the old Powhatan era was still running. But that's this guy's field, man. That's where it went right across his farm. He raised his hay and crops and stuff, and he took a picture too. There's where he was cutting hay one day when I was talking to him, and the bridge still goes right over his farmland. There's a picture of the he's got a baler here and he's cutting, doing his hay right there. But that's all of that. I'm going to get away from that. We're going to move on over here to where we going to start. This program got to be so long that we had to divide it into 3 different programs. So we had one program in May. This is the second program, and then next month in October, 3rd Tuesday night in October, we'll wrap up the High Bridge story. Anyway, let me get down here to start tonight, okay? This is just saying that I'll be posting the slides you see tonight. They will be on the internet in a week or 2 as soon as I get a chance. It takes a long time. I have to go to the library at Longwood, set the computer up, and start uploading it. It takes a couple of hours, sometimes more, for all that information to upload. Once it's uploaded, I can send out a copy of the link where everybody can get on there and look at it. Okay. Let's see. Okay. First thing we're going to talk about is slideshow. Let me see here. Okay. Contractors. Tried to get as much of the contractor information I could to get the pictures. So don't have many pictures of the contractors, but we do have, and I think it was in the last program we did, we have all the names of the contractors who built it and what they were doing and so on, and that will be on the internet. Here's a short version of it. Engineers and contractors, and it goes on and tells who from each area. Looks like to me, from what I can see, the railroad pretty much hired the same contractors, and they went here, they went there, the same people over and over and over. I'm sure they are dependent on the railroad to keep their company going. So I'm sure all Mr. Vail had to do was oversee them. That was his major job. He didn't have to stay there every day and work and get on the help and handle the help and all that. The contractors had their own help. The railroad did have a lot of local help from the local area. They hired farmers. I mean, I've talked to people whose family was in Appomattox, and the man came down here and worked. Billy Paulson said his people came from Pennsylvania, and his daddy stayed here, but his other uncle went back. But I guess Billy's here because of High Bridge. Anyway, and I also try to get pictures of all the construction equipment, so I'm going to quickly just go through and show you the equipment. All this equipment, of course, is specialized for the railroad. Here are the men that were connected with the cement plant. They had to come and construct a cement plant on site. It looks like it's metal, and they probably could dismantle it, move it, but they had to build a boat, because this boat had to go out on the Appomattox River and float around and suck up sand, which they would use to make the concrete. So they called this boat they built the Titanic. And the reason for that was it had just been a year before that the real Titanic sunk. So that was fresh in everybody's mind, that name. Here are the men that are cutting or leveling these pedestals. I believe there were 84 of these concrete pedestals built, and they're still there. The bridge is still standing on them. These two metal, I guess you call them tie downs, screw downs. The bridge came, the metal came and set right on it and then tightened the bolts down. So this was a monumental task, building 80 some of these. And you'll see some more of them. There the men are again. They had at both ends of the bridge, they had to build a area of concrete where the bridge would connect to each end to the land. So they had to they had to build these concrete, look like spears or concrete telephone poles, maybe you'd say. Then they had to drive them 60 or 70 feet into the earth to make the stable foundation so the ends of the bridge wouldn't move. So you're going to see a lot of pictures of these pile drivers, they call them. So here's a picture of one of the cranes. And these cranes had these huge buckets they would use to haul sand in, and later they would make cement. They would use this cement buckets to haul these things of cement up, and then they would dump them in the forms that they had built. And to get these buckets up and down under the bridge area, they built a separate track down in the bottom. They had this little engine called the donkey engine, and that would go up and down the track carrying supplies that they would need. And that was a narrow gauge track. The regular trains that went over the bridge and so on, that's what we call it, regular grade. But the ones built down in the bottom were narrow because the equipment was run on that narrow gauge. Just some close-ups of some of the equipment there. Here's an example of the locals probably that came to move the dirt around. They had to move a lot of dirt, and you see these pans they had, looks like wheelbarrows with their wheels. And they would bring their donkeys, I guess that is, and they would hook them to these pans, and they would drag the dirt along and dump it wherever it needed to be. They would call this scraper force, and I'm sure that's where a lot of the local people came in. It was a good labor force for the good money for the people around here. It gave them jobs there for about a year and a half maybe. That's another picture of it. And one thing I liked about this program I have now, I can go in here and click on it, and then like say click right there and see how to blow the picture up. I can really see good, and I can zoom in and zoom out. Here's a piece of equipment owned by Boxley. You can see it. And Boxley, Bray, and Bray, I believe it was. Anyway, that company, I believe, is still in existence up between Lynchburg and Roanoke. It's changed hands several times. And we have looked into it, and we believe that the man that worked there, worked this machine, worked for this company, we believe he was from Farmville, and he eventually, in the coming years, he was able to buy the controlling interest of this Boxley company, which is still in existence. We'll talk more about the man in a few minutes. Some of you probably know his family. There's a picture. It had two arms that would swing off to the sides, and the train up here up front was a flatbed, and it had dirt on it, and when it would get to a certain pace, they would hit a button and it would dump the dirt off on one side or the other. And then this last car they drug along would grade it down. So that's how they got the earth built like they wanted it to lay the track. There it is, Boxley, Goodman, and Bray. Here's a picture of one of the many, what do I call that? Boilers, steam boilers. There was no electricity down there at High Bridge until 1939. So this was all 20 years or so before they had electricity. So all the power was boilers. And they had different stations around the work sites, and they would hook cables or belts, and these would supply the power that was needed to move the equipment and the different things around. There's another picture. This is one of the drivers, and if you look, you'll probably see, and maybe not just, they would have the long stalk and then a big weight at the top, and that thing would come down and keep hitting it, and it would drive it in the ground. Some say in some parts of this that it only took it down an inch or two at a time, and some of them were as big as 60 feet, so it took days to just drive one in the ground. There were at least 4 different cranes on the site, and one was called the small crane, or the wooden crane. Here's a small crane again. This one we know it was the Smith Towels crane, because it's written on the side of the crane. And this one had a claw, like, and it would go down and grab dirt and pick it up and drop it somewhere. So that dug the holes for one thing. Here's another one right here, which we'll find a better picture of that in a minute. Here's a pile driver. They'll take these piles down at the bottom and drive them in the ground. And then here's a picture of the barge known as the Titanic. There's a picture of this boiler. There's another one. All this had to be right beside the current day bridge. There was 2 bridges were built about 20 feet apart. Yeah, right, Rich? Okay. And here's a picture of the donkey train. I don't know why they call it donkey train unless it was just small. But you can see that too had a boiler to run it up and down the track. Here is one of the stations where they have a boiler in the background here, and it was connected to a system where they had cables hooked to it, and they could gear it down, speed it up, or pull it in or pull it out. But there's that. And if you look up here in the top left, you can see the old high bridge was still in operation right up there, and they were building a new bridge down here. Here is the car here that I think also appears in the Lynchburg pictures, very similar to it. And I have a better picture of it coming up. But here's those cars that had, must have had some kind of hydraulic system. They would dig dirt, pipe from it along the sides of the track, dump it on these cars as much as they could, and then they would go up to where they wanted to dump it, and something would happen, and the car would either go up that way from one side or that way and dump the dirt the other side. Then that red car would come on and smooth it out. So they had it all figured out. Here's that car that was very similar to the one that you see in Lynchburg. It's a good chance they brought it down Farmville and used it again. There's a good picture of that car that would tilt from side to side. You can kind of see it pretty good there. I was interested. I noticed looking at the pictures blown up, the men were sitting up under here eating lunch. I guess it was better to eat. Let's see, escape. Okay. There's just a close-up of some of the machinery. That's the bucket. There's a car that's tilted over, you can see that. What they would do is they would build these long tracks where they wanted the dirt, and they used the local trees that they cut down to build those. Then this train would back it out over there, or pull it out over there, and it would dump dirt on both sides, and then that machine would come by and spread it. And these timbers and all of this is still buried there now. They covered it all up as they needed. This is where the new bridge was coming up to join with the metal bridge. More pictures of the Titanic. You can see it looks like it had a boiler on each end. I'll show you another picture too. There's a close-up of it there. Let's see if we can blow it out a little bit. See the men up on this end. Looks like there's smoke or steam shooting out here. So this must be the end. It looks like where they pumped the water up, and then the water would run down a trap, I guess you would say. Sand would fall in, and the boat and the water would run back out into the river. Here's an example of one of the buckets. They would put sand in these buckets, and they would also put cement in these buckets and move it around. Probably also use probably to load rock and carry it around. There's a picture of looking down into the sand boat, and they're shoveling up the sand and putting it in the buckets. When they got the sand, this is cement probably, they built these forms to build these real tall pedestals, and then they would lift these buckets of cement, which they had taken up the track, lift it up, and then it would dump it down and fill these forms up with concrete. There's a good example of the pile drivers. And I'll show you something else we noticed that we'd never seen before. We were able to blow it up. There are men up in there working. If you look close, you can see them. Right, there's two men right there. They were stationed on these platforms there, and I guess they helped line it up so it would go straight down.
That was in the days before OSHA.
Here's a picture of the pile driver. And you can see here the pile is kind of leaned up there waiting to get stationary, and then they'll start banging it down into the ground. Just another picture of the pile driver. There's a cement plant. And it looks like that could be taken apart and transported from work site to work site. Here's the barrel that would roll around, and the cement would pour it into these buckets. And we have some other pictures of it coming. There it is in color. Here it is, and this train would come right up in front of it, and these buckets would be on the train, and the cement would go right into those buckets. And then they would take the buckets up to the pedestals and dump them into forms. Another picture of the donkey train. Another picture of the, I'll show you how big one of these things are here. Find out where I was here. Okay. We'll come back to that. All right. Go on, move along. You have four different cranes, and this one here is the one that's set up on top of the bridge, and then we use that to leapfrog from section to section. As they built a section, they would ride this big crane out, and then that would help set the next set of steel. Then they would move the crane forward, and it set the next pile. So they used that. I call it leapfrogging from one end to the other. There's another picture of the cement plant. This is a picture of the track that ran from one end of the bridge to the other, down into the under-high bridge. And they used that to transport the materials back and forth up the track, including cement. There's a claw that dug the holes for the pedestals. There's a claw, they called it the orange peeler, I believe is what that was called. And here's a picture here that I was amazed at. It snowed, and they even worked in the snow, which probably wasn't too hard to do in the equipment. There's a close-up of that, and you can see one man running the controls, and I guess this man here was the lookout. He's hanging out beside the car. Another picture of how they built these tall pedestals and then covered them up with dirt. Crane guy again, I don't know who he was, but he was looking. Just a picture of the crane in operation. There's a close-up. There's a close-up of the orange peel, scooping up dirt. Each pedestal had to have a hole dug, and then they built a form. and then they filled that up with concrete, and then they built a pedestal on top of this. One particular pedestal or two fell, evenly spaced from one end to the other. One set of pedestals had to be placed in the river, so they had to probably do some damming up of the river, building, and then the bridge pedestals are still in the river today. I always like this picture. When they built the bridge, they had to run all these tracks down in the bottom, and all this steel had to be delivered from Roanoke and taken down under the old bridge. So there's a track coming down from the left, and then they would drop the steel in preset places. They knew where every piece was going to go. They dumped it off at the right places. Then the other track, which you see here, was where the little train would run up and down. There's the Virginia Bridge Company. That is the company that sent this crane down to the site. They manufactured all the steel components in Roanoke, and then they brought it down to High Bridge on these flat cars, I guess, and then they set them off exactly where they needed to be, where they would set them up. So there's Mr. Bale right here with his straw hat on, and we know he didn't take every last picture because he's in a couple of these pictures. So somebody else was helping him to do some of the camera work. There's the same picture, just drawn back a little bit. There he is standing. Here in this picture they have dismantled the old bridge, and then they grabbed it up and then rode it down the track and dumped it over on the side. And that was the rice end of the track. And then after they got it laid on the ground, they had men unbolting as much of it as they could. Then the steel parts were hauled away, probably for recycling. There is the big crane that I can tell you about, and it started down here at the rice end. Everything started at the rice end, and they worked back to the Cumberland end. So here they are laying the first girder, and there it is. The crane is sitting on the dirt or the ground. And then once they got this set up like they wanted, then they brought the crane out onto this section and built the next section. And they did that on and on and on until they got to the opposite end of the construction site. There's a close-up of the picture. There's another one. So you can see here, this is looking from the Cumberland side down to Rice. Here comes the steel that's been set up. Then there's that big crane coming from joint to joint, setting up. The girders keep coming to the other end. At one time I thought they probably sat on the ground and lifted all that stuff up high, but they didn't do that. They sat on top of the bridge, kept building it right in front of them. But if you look real close in some of these photographs, you can see the men crawling around up in all these girders. Couldn't be real safe, I wouldn't say. There they are setting one of the girders. You can see they've worked their way on that here. Then they were able to have this, which was pre-constructed, and they set it right down between here and here. And they would pull out on that and go in. There's another picture of it. This crane, I'm going to show you how close of that. That was one big crane there. And I think they used that from site to site, or if they had a train wreck, they probably had to take that to the train site. That was a big piece of equipment there. There's another picture of it in color. There it is again. Here it is. I think this is a picture of where they are setting the last girders. And this was May 28, 1914. They wrapped the job up by June, middle of June, so this was about 3 weeks before they were through. But you can see this is the rice end way down here, and this is the Cumberland end up here. And somebody had written on this girder, to Columbus, meaning Columbus, Ohio. Dismantling the old bridge. Okay. Now we're going to get out of that one. See how we're doing on time here. 8 o'clock, so we got time. Go into part 3. Slideshow, current slide. Okay, part 3. This thing, like I said, was set up to do 4 parts, but we're going to get it done in 3 parts because we missed a couple of meetings. So here we go. I got this out of the Farmville Herald. When they were building High Bridge, the people from Farmville, it says in the actual Farmville Herald, I found these articles, after church on Sundays, people from Farmville would walk 8 miles down to High Bridge on the tracks to see how the construction was going on. There was of great interest to the local people. And some of the men who stayed there all the time, we know that their families would come to see them on Sundays. A long way to walk, though. Okay. I was asked at the last meeting if anybody died during the construction of the bridge, and we do know of one person that died, and I'll read a little bit of that to you. L.B. Saunders, a bridge workman, met instant death on Sunday morning about 2 miles east of Farmville, Norfolk and Western Railway. He had spent the afternoon and night before in town, during which he was arrested, charged with disorderly conduct, property drinking. On the payment of a small fine, the mayor released him from custody early Saturday night, so to get back to work, and he remained in town until about 4 o'clock Sunday. Real early morning he started then for High Bridge, and when he was about halfway on a westbound freight train ran over him. His body was mangled almost beyond recognition and is scattered for several hundreds of yards along the side of the track. Saunders was a young man whose father is said to have been a foreman among the bridge workers. The remains of the unfortunate were viewed by the coroner Spencer and turned over to an undertaker who prepared and shipped them to his home in West Virginia. So, but I'm sure there's probably other people that got killed too, but that was the right couple right up the phone Pearl gave him. Probably got drunk in town, got put in jail, and got out, probably did some more drinking before he headed home. Whatever. Here's a workman unloading rocks, limestone rocks. These limestone rocks were brought in from quarries nearby, and they were then driven down the tracks that went down into the bottom. Then they were unloaded with this steam shovel claw, and they were piled behind the cement mixer. The other men building the Titanic, we looked at that. Because there was no electricity, the lamps and all were oil lamps. I guess they could have took a battery, but who knows. Here are the 4 guys. Everything had to be done by hand. There was no copy machines and so on. So these young men were probably tasked with record keeping. Here, we talked about it earlier, about these big, giant concrete spears, I call them, going down into the ground. Well, to build them, they built them right on site, they would get these iron rods and woven iron, and as you can see, they spread it out and then wire them all together. But then after they got these, what they call skeletons, they would take them over and they would drop them in a wooden form, and then concrete was poured over them. And then they had to lay out in the sun for 3 months to harden before they could dry them in the ground. But a lot of work to build those ends. There's a close-up picture of it. Kind of looks like bamboo almost, but it was iron, steel, whatever. Here's just a close-up of one of the men there that was running one of these pulley things. The concrete came to the site, powdered concrete came to the site on the railroad car, we think. Then it was stored in this building right here. Then when they were ready to mix, they would put it on this cart and a cable would pull this thing up to the top, and then they would open the bags and the concrete would go down, and it would be mixed with sand and rocks, and then the shoe ready to front this concrete. There's a picture again of the tilt car, I call it. There's where they had all these forms built, and they laid those wire mesh forms down in there. Then they would pour concrete over them. They had to bring the concrete in these special made wheelbarrows, it looks like. And then after they got set up good and hard, they would lay them out in the sun now under the bridge and let them harden up for 3 months. There was a lot of the men that stayed there stayed in these houses, they called it, that were built right there on site. And it looks like to me probably 4 to maybe 6 men could stay in each one of those. This particular one, that is Mr. Willis Bale, the boss, and this is a concrete contractor who probably getting in good with the boss. Here is some men working, and you can see right there that that's one of those concrete pilings. There it is again. It's a concrete piling, and they would hook up chains or wires or iron cables to it, and they would lift it to it standing straight up, and they would get it lined up in that crib, I guess, and then it would start hammering it down in the ground. And they're the men that are working around the base of the piling. There's some close-ups of the Titanic, and you can see it's a boil on one end and a boil probably on the other end. Another picture of the men that were actually moving the dirt in. This picture was taken up on top of the old bridge, looking down here, and you can see where they had started digging holes for the pedestals, and they had laid the track along there to move materials around on. Another picture of the pedestal. You can see they had barrels of water evidently, and they were going into the boilers, I guess, to make the steam. Another picture in color. Here is where they building the tall pedestals. At each end, the pedestals were taller than the one there in the middle. So you can see this is pedestal like 41, 42, this is 41. When there was a 41 left and a 41 right. Well, you don't see all this when you go down there now because they piled dirt up here almost to the tops of them. So that was something I had to figure out. There's a picture of a man. So you see how much dirt they had to haul in there to cover those things up. A lot of dirt. And not a whole lot of equipment to do it with. And when they got ready to carry the materials up to the new bridge, or to the pad they were going to build to connect the end of the bridge to the dirt, to the earth there, they would send the concrete up in these cars. It would go up the track, and then it would be poured. So that's how they got the concrete up to the top. This machine here would have pulleys and it would go right up the track, come down for another load. The old bridge and the new bridge were two different heights. I think the new bridge was 7 or 8 feet higher. How many?
7.
7 feet higher than that other bridge. So here they are sitting on the old bridge, hoping the train's not coming. And they're lifting this ring, and set it down on top of these to set the girders. So they're the men.
Did the trains run?
The trains ran,
And
yes.
the whole time they were building all this stuff?
Yes, but they could go right, they were like 10, 15, 20 feet apart from the men, but they worked right along when the trains were, as far as we know. I don't know of anybody that got hit. The trains at that time would stop at High Bridge. In other words, if the men working there needed something from Sears or wanted to order a pair of boots or shoes or tools, they could order them from a mail order place, and then the train would deliver them to the post office or the train station there. Didn't have much of a train station, but they would get delivered there, and their mail could come there too. But yes, here they are. These men had you can see they're riding down on the girder to make sure they get placed in exactly the right place. That wasn't real safe. No safety boots, no belts, no safety equipment, just hanging on for dear life. Another pile driver picture, we got enough of those. Here's a picture looking down into the Titanic, and you can see where the water would be pumped up here and come down this trough, and it would separate the water from the sand. And then the sand would be hand shoveled into these buckets, and then the crane, probably way above there, would lift the sand up and get it down the track to the cement plant. Some of the men that worked there, I tried to trace what happened to them after the bridge work was done. Where did they go? How did they end up in life? And this one man, Uncle John Winfield Reed, Bob Flippin was able to find out a good amount of history of him. We don't know exactly what he did there at the site, but we do know that he often served as a night watchman. He's buried at a church kind of across from Sailor's Creek Battlefield. Bob and some people early on went down there and cleaned the grave site up a little bit. But there's not a stone, it's just a rock there, Bob said. But worker here, we got his name, Charles W. Parris. He looks like he was probably maybe one of the office workers. It could have been one of the surveyors. His companion there was N.F. Muir, and I was able to find out a good amount about him. I'll tell you about it in a minute. And this one, I wondered at one point if it was J.A. Jameson from Appomattox, but all the spelling that I found was J.A. Jameson Jr. And we don't really know anything about him other than that. But it looked like to me, too, they probably got dressed up and went somewhere on the weekends. That's the guy in Crane, but we never were able to figure out who he was. This is the actual Henry Howell, the concrete contractor, and he buddied around with Mr. Babel. There he is in his work clothes. He and his crew had to, after the concrete had dried, they had to chisel it down where it was perfectly level. So, this is a picture of the men standing there working with that crane close up. There they are with chisels and hammers and brooms. Each one of those 84 of these had to be smoothed down. That took a lot of time. There they are again. And these are the bolts that held the steel piers up, I guess you would say, to the concrete. All that's still there today. Here they are setting the last beam. And you can see he's walking along with regular shoes, gloves, toe belt. And if you look down here real close, you can see that the workers standing down on the old bridge, hoping that the train won't come back. Okay? And there's a sign. I was able to blow this up and you could see what was written there. Originally I thought it said to Cumberland, but no, it says to Columbus, which must have been the end of the line for this part of the railroad. Here they are taking the bridge apart and lowering it down. Here's the new bridge over here, and all they did was lay a board across there to the old bridge, which went down 7 feet, and they walked across from one bridge to the other. No belts, no work shoes, nothing. If you fell, you'd fall about 100 feet down to your death probably. But that was their job. Here, after the bridge has been dismantled, the big chunks of the bridge were brought up here. And we tried to figure out where this site is, and I was able to find out. Bob kind of told me he thought it was on the Rice end of the construction site. And then I talked to the man down at High Bridge who's in charge of the bridge now. I can't think of his name. Dan Jordan. And he and I kind of decided that this area right in here, Nana, is probably where they built the new visitor center. Because we looked at the topo maps of that area and so on, and this seems to be about the right level for where they would have built the new visitor center. But all this was dismantled and hauled away, and we speculated that probably one of these bridges along here, one of these buildings, was probably what was a little station for the train when it stopped there. There's another picture of them taking the bridge apart. And you can see they don't have any fancy equipment, just regular old work clothes. And the workmen, information on the men that worked at High Bridge during the time. Uncle John, we were able to find his death certificate. And we know when he was born, he died of, I think Bob said, a heart attack maybe. We know how old he was when he died. Bob was even able to find descendants of his who live in Rice now. We traced him back to being born as a slave at Winfield Farm, which was a 4 and 10 acre farm just outside of Cumberland going down towards Powhatan. And he was born there into slavery, and he grew up. They would get out of slavery. He went over and lived in Rice, and he got a job here at High Bridge. And all we know is that he died years later, and we have all that here. Somebody wants to read it later. And he's buried there at Sailor's Creek. And I was able to nail down where his relatives live now. And it's on that road. If you go down Sailor's Creek and you cross 307, go straight across up Curry over to 460, or to 360. 460. 360 going into Burkeville Creek. In between those two roads is where he's buried. Looks like to me he's buried very near where he used to know a guy where Vernon Dove used to live down that hollow. Vernon might be kin to him, who knows. So we know John worked over here at High Bridge. He's buried over here at Sailor's Creek, and his people today live down here between 307 and 360. J.A. Jamison Jr. is here. We were able to identify him. B.S. Bottomley. Couldn't find anything on either one of these guys, but they're bound to be contractors. I mean, they look like they worked in the office and probably oversaw some of the work. And N.F. Muir. And I was able to get information on Mr. Muir. He was 22 years old when he was working at High Bridge. And after that, it seems he ended up in Richmond and went to dental school, became a dentist. And I graduated from dentistry school in 1918. He eventually moved to Richmond and opened a dentist office in 1923. And he remained in Roanoke doing dentistry until 1974. And I talked to some people and read some things on him. He evidently, by the time he died, he was a predominant dentist in Roanoke. Got his start at High Bridge. His different stuff I found on him. I included all this stuff so if somebody later wants to go back and study this stuff, if I do something particular, it'll all be on the internet. There he was, where 370 Woods Avenue, Roanoke, Virginia. That's probably where he lived. He got his Army card and so on. This is one man that we did a good amount of research on. Also, we noticed this is a commissary where the men could go during their time there and buy proper toiletries, first aid stuff, something to drink, something to eat, canned foods and so on. And we were able to identify these three men. J.W. Goodwin, who was probably a contractor. This man was Mr. T.W. Brooks Sr., and this man was Mr. G. Gibney. The only one we were traced down was Mr. T.W. Brooks Sr. And while I'm at this picture, I'm going to show you this sign here. It says Gall and McIntosh Druggist, Farmville, Virginia. So evidently, Gall and McIntosh, who had a drugstore there where Baldwin's is today, or was, he must have sent goods down there and they were sold out of that store. And he's got an ad down in front of the store. But Thomas Washington Brooks Sr. at High Bridge construction site in 1913. U.S. Census showing him living on South Main Street in Farmville, Virginia. And I checked and he lived approximately right across from McDonald's. Today it's a road going down and then it goes down to that parking deck. That's where his house would have been. He was born in 1886. He died in 1941. The interesting part about him, when he was working there, some of the people that worked there either lived in this camp they built or they could rent from surrounding farmers. And this Mr. Brooks, who evidently was part of that, where they dumped the dirt, so on, debris, Boxley Company. He ended up owning that part of that Boxley Company in later years till he died. But he went over to Carrie Smith Farm, which borders High Bridge. And we know Carrie Smith and all the Smith people because Joe Smith is the one who started here in 1994-5. She wrote a book about High Bridge at the time, and she gave the first two programs we had. But when she gave her programs, it wasn't until 1905 that we had these veiled pictures. So all she could use basically was pictures that she took herself down at High Bridge. But she got the ball rolling. But Mr. Smith and Mr. Brooks, living over there on the Smith farm, took a liking to one of Carrie Smith's daughters. And he went back there about a year or so later, it looks like, and married Carrie Smith's daughter. And at the time he was at High Bridge, he was 27, and he married this Ethel H. He married Ethel, and she became Ethel H. Brooks. And she today, if she was alive today, she would be John Marshall Smith's aunt. So Joe Smith's husband is a descendant of this man who worked at High Bridge. And of course, many of you know that T.W. Brooks moved Farmville. He was part of the company that started Caton and Brooks Coal Company in and then that developed into a little oil company. John knows all about that, and probably knows too much. But anyway, he was involved in all that. And then he had a son named T.W. Brooks Jr., who we probably all know today. And here's Mr. Brooks Jr. He died at 55 years old. I didn't realize that.
He did?
According to records.
Never seen it.
Didn't seem like that to me either, but that's,
Yeah.
you know, you never think about it when we was alive like that.
We were kids.
Yeah. Anyway, he had 2 kids, Tom Brooks and Steve Brooks. But I mean, he had 2 daughters, but the 2 boys
Oh,
played a role in this too. You and some of the others, we went to school with these 2 boys, and they came back later and played another part in this story. This is just the wedding announcements and so on. And down here where this bottom area is, this is a High Bridge area, and this is a Smith farm up here. So they were working down here, and he went up and camped out with the Smith families and got him a wife. This is T.W. Brooks's, I guess, death certificate. Got that on there. This tells all about Mr. Brooks and what he did in Farmville. And then his son, the one that worked at High Bridge, we think he eventually built this hotel. He went on and did hotels, other large buildings, mostly up towards Lynchburg and Roanoke, and he eventually became half owner probably of Bray Brooks and Company. And today it's still called Blacksley. So there's the car that he was probably affiliated with when he was at High Bridge, at the camp area. I had never thought about where all these guys were going to live when they built that thing. But from the negatives we got, I was able to figure out that they had to build a camp for the men to live so they could then start the construction work. So the camp was one of the first things they did. Also, they had to do a lot of surveying prior to anybody arriving on the site. So I think these 2 men who were in the picture sitting in the office at one point, I think they were the surveyors. And they probably had to designate where the new track was going to swing out and go beside the old track. And we know this one right here on the right is the one that became the dentist, Mr. Murrell. There they are in the office working. But here's part of the camp, and we know they didn't have any running water bathrooms in the cabin, so I searched around, and here's they had porta-johns, or wooden porta-johns, I guess you'd call them back in the day, Johnny houses, and they were scattered around the camp. That was very important. And of course, it was important for the people down at High Bridge to know the train schedule and communicate with people back here at this place in Farmville, so they would at least know when the train's coming. They could pretty much figure, all right, Farmville right now will be over here in 20 minutes or so. But this is an actual picture of the watch that was used by the, what was his name again? Thank you. Train station. Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson's family gave me a picture of his watch, and he worked here for like 30 or 40 years, and he was running the station, I guess, when they were building High Bridge, and they communicated by the telegraph. There were telegraph lines run all the way down, probably all the way to Crew, Nottaway, and so on. They had a connection to Farmville and other places by telegraph, so they weren't completely cut off from civilization. And we figure those little cabins they lived in were probably heated by a little stove, something like this, some type of wood stove. And they probably also, the ones that ate and cooked down there, they would cook on top of this wood stove and probably heated some water. I questioned Judge Smith about where the well was on the property, or if how many wells there were. She said in all her days of wandering around down there, she only noticed one well, and it evidently was up towards the campsites, but she didn't know exactly where it was today. Then I told them that they could get mail and get packages delivered to them because the train would stop and deliver it to them there. And all these pictures, over 100 pictures now, there's no trucks or cars in any of the pictures. I thought that was odd because this was 1913, 1914, and many cars came on the scene in Farmville in 1902 and 1903. The first cars were coming through. It was about 1910 before cars really became commonplace here. And it was about 1910 to 1915 before the mud streets got paved. So, but you would have thought somewhere along the line there would, somebody would show that they have a truck, but there were no trucks or cars.
In 1913, they put in the paper that how many cars were at my grandparents' wedding. I have to go back and look, but it was a very small number.
Yeah. Well, there was, people couldn't afford it on it.
Yeah, well, if it was big enough, that was in the wedding, in the paper about the weddings, how many cars were on the street.
So the first thing they had, one of the first things they had to do was build a camp. So then I said, well, where in the heck was the camp? So they wanted to get enough pictures put together and look in the backgrounds and knew where all the things were. And the camp was right coming in from Cumberland side. If you walk down that today, this is where the steel bridge connects to the land. The camp would have been right off to your left, standing there looking down towards Rice.
You mentioned a well, approximately where that camp is located. Ron Bowles told me years ago there's a real bowl spring coming out of the ground. Right in that area.
Very likely springs and wells both. This is a topo type map here, and it shows that all this area down under the bridge, as we know, it floods from time to time. So the camp had to be built up on, couldn't build it down in the, closer to the river, they had to build it up on higher ground. So we figured this is just high enough not to flood, but yet still close. So figured the camp is up here on this side. River Road runs up here, so it would be the camp would be there, and then the next thing behind the camp would have been the Smith farm. So I have a couple more maps. So I told you that they had to run a railroad track down into the bottom to get all these steel pieces down there. So way up here near where the parking lot is now, up where Mike Rice's wife's house is, they took a spur off the side of the track and went down, following the contour of the land, and came down to the flat part down in the bottom. And then they ran a straight track all the way across, built a little bridge over the river right there. So the track came down here, and all the stuff that came, such as rocks, concrete, pads, everything had to be delivered to the bottom. There was a spur coming up and going down to the bottom. Camp area right there, and the cement plant was right at the bottom. We know the cement plant where it was because you can see it plainly in the pictures. It was right up against this little railroad track. So they had an office over in that camp, and this is how close you can tell that the camp was to the track. Here's the bridge built in 1901, the last modification of this bridge, 1901. And from the porch of the office, this picture was taken, and so you see it's not far over to the old bridge. And the new bridge would have been built in between here. I never have been able to figure out what this, looks like a couple of planks that would do like that. Maybe they had to shut the gate. I don't know why they had all this fenced unless there were cows or something wandering around. Don't know that. But this picture was taken from up on the old bridge and looking back toward the Smith farm up in this area. And you can see all these little buildings are built back up in here. This was the camp. This evidently was the office, because you can see that thing that would block the track from time to time. And you'll notice there are a lot of stumps. They had to clear all these trees down through here. And I said, what in the world? Why did they cut all them trees down? Well, finally I was told that they cut the trees down and then they built those trestles, temporary trestles, and they run the car with dirt and then it got covered up. So that's where a lot of those trees went. They used everything they could from on the site.
The fields over there on the Smith farm look like tobacco.
They did raise tobacco over there. Yeah. Here's a close, I blew the picture up and you can see all these little cabins all back in there. And I figure there's probably at least 20 cabins, and they put 5 or 6 men to each cabin. There have been over 100 people staying there. Plus, like I said, some of the people stayed in Farmville, some nearby farms. So quite a workforce there. And you can see these lines running down through here. There's lines like that on both sides of the bridge. Bob said one set of the lines were the telegraphs, and the other side were lines to somehow work the bridge signals. Do you know, Richard? And I guess Bob was pretty much speculating too. Here's a long shot back, and yes, this would be the Smith area up here. This is the Cumberland end up on this end. So that's where all the activity was going on.
Jim, I've always been told that there was 4 Civil War forts, 2 on each end of the bridge.
Yes.
And I don't know where the one on the Smith side is. Was it dug up when all this was done, this construction?
I'll get to that in a few minutes, I think. If I don't, you remind me and I'll find it for you. I've got so many segments, I forget what's in what segment. But I think it's in tonight's program. Anyway, you can see where they built this long track coming down into the bottom. I don't know why they built these other 2 things really, but they were hauling in dirt and dumping it. And here's the pedestals they were building in the bottom left corner there. And I was often asked about this tall thing right here. This was a crane. It looked like they built it, and it would lift the cement and the rocks and stuff up in the air and drop them down into the concrete mixer. There it is again. And that's showing setting of the last girder or 2. Another picture of the trees that were cut down. And you can see here, this is where they were building the, what was the name of it, where they connected the bridge to the land? Abutments. It had to build a concrete abutment at each end, and the bridge would attach to that, and the railroad tracks would go back. Well, see all these things down here in the bottom, these are the pilings that were driven down in the ground. It took a long time to get all that down. You can see those nice pretty pilings. By the time it got knocking them down in the ground 40, 50 feet, it beat some of them up right there, but all of them went into the ground. That's what that machine, and you can see 1 or 2 of them hang out. There must be one in there, and they have to get it upright, then they got to get it in the right position, then they start hammering it down. There they are, had them in on the porch. Get a close-up of the cabins again. Seen on the inside anything. Interestingly enough, in January 14, the 2nd year they were there, I guess about halfway through the project, smallpox broke out in Cumberland County, and they had to stop work, and everybody had to meet there at this cabin, and the health man from Cumberland County and the sheriff from Cumberland County came and made sure everybody got smallpox. They couldn't go back to work till everybody was vaccinated. Here's a picture that came in with all the negatives. And Bob said, this man here is Mr. Martin, and we think his kids and his wife probably visiting him on a holiday or weekend. And we don't know if these men were dressed up to go to town or if they were his brother-in-laws. We don't know that, but that was the Martin family. Never could find anybody that knew anything about the Martin family, but he had certainly been busy. One of the first steps, once they got the cabins built, was getting that track built down into the bottom. So like I said, yellow mark is a train track. This purple line kind of indicates how the contour of the land took them down in the bottom. Then this solid purple line went all the way across here, and that was where the donkey train went up and down. And over in here would have been where the camp would have been. This is the actual river. This is a picture probably taken towards the end of the project, because you can see the new bridge right there. They built this track from a spur off of the regular track and went down in the bottom, and that's heading on down to under the bridge. And then all that track, I guess, was taken up after the construction site left. Certainly it was, because as many people as been down there with metal detectors, somebody would have found all that iron buried. And for people that don't know what narrow gauge and regular gauge is, the regular train was a big train like this, and this little donkey train was that size. And you can see the difference in the size. And the tracks under down the bottom where they were working, some of the tracks had 3 rails, meaning the big train could go on it, or the little train could go on it. Pretty unique. Saving putting down 2 sets of tracks. There's another example of a 3rd rail. And you can see as the bridge was under construction and the steel was getting put up, the little track where they ran along under, that was getting covered over. And like I said, I believe they probably took that track up when they left there. 3 rails again. When they put this little track down, they had to cross the river, so there's a bridge crossing the river. And that doesn't look real good, does it? But you can see where they had already come across here and built these pedestals in the river. This is pedestal number 10, and this is pedestal number 10. They had built that. They started on the right end, and they came towards Cumberland building these pedestals. And this is taken from up on the old bridge and looking down here at this is what we call the bottom, or down under the bridge. There's a water tower, storage buildings, and here's where they pile sand and rocks and things. And this is the building that kept the powdered cement in bags in. This is the actual cement where they mixed it up with a mixer. And you can see where the tracks will run here. The tracks and the circles and things look like they didn't bother taking up the old track. They just laid another track over top of it. Okay. There's a narrow gauge up here where they're loading in concrete in the buckets. Standard track right here. And then 3 rail right here. And you can see right there they just covered it up. Who knows, but there's picture of this might have been some 3 rails up on top, I don't know. Kind of looks like maybe that crane is sitting on narrow rails, we don't know, but that's a crane.
That's all standard gauge.
Okay. Richard said it's all standard gauge there. This is the Virginia Bridge and Iron Company. They're the people that cast and made all the parts for the bridge in Roanoke and shipped it down here. I'm sure they used this crane to set it up. And then they also used this crane to take the old bridge down and haul old parts back. The cement plant, I'm going to show a little bit more about that. We know where the cement plant was, and we have all the information on it, but we're not going to go into that tonight. But there again is a picture of it, and we were able to figure out what this is a mixer. This is where it's stored. This little building right here was where the steam boiler was to pull the carts with the buckets of cement. And then the materials like the rock pile and the sand pile and some of that was back in the back. And you can see where the narrow gauge went up close there, parked to get the cement loaded while the bigger train could go around here on this track. Here's a good picture of it. There's a water tower, and you can kind of see where it might be piping going over to the cement mixer probably. And there's all this material that was covered up, looked like by tarps. And this was a crane, hand-built crane, and that would pick that stuff up and put it over in the mixer. Just more pictures. There's a plant right there. Go back and I can figure out how to go back. And, this right here, this is where this building right here is the same building as this right here. Everything was operated by cables to move that concrete and the materials around on. And there they are unloading a train car full of rocks that was shipped in there. This is the old 1901 bridge right in the background. This here on the right is the old bridge. And here you can see right down this line here is where they were preparing to build a new bridge. This is the Rice end. This is the Cumberland end. Another picture just looking down. Here, like I said, man with the cables. There's the old bridge right there where the train would go right on by. Concrete being hauled up the hills. There's another close-up of it. Another picture of them taking stuff up to the ends of the tracks. This is going up the hill to the Rice end. They just take the concrete, I guess, and haul it up and dump it into the forms at the top of the hill. There's a close-up. There they are taking the powdered concrete out of the shed. Cable drawing that thing up, and these men would cut the sacks up and pour the concrete down into the mixer. And there's some cat up on top there looking down on the whole operation. Here they are at the eastern end of the Rice end, and you can see looking right down there, that's where the new bridge is going right down through there, and you can see where they've been moving dirt and earth and so on. Another picture of the cement mixer, another picture of that, another picture of that. That's the railroad track going down into the bottom. You can see the new bridge which has been built, and I believe that's the new bridge. It could be the old bridge, I'm not sure.
It's the new earthwork of the old bridge.
Mm-hmm.
New earthworks in front.
Yeah, right here. So here's where the new bridge is going here.
Right.
And there's the old bridge right there. They got to bring the new bridge up out of the ground. More just pictures looking down in the bottom. You can see how it looks like helter-skelter down there, and all these tracks overlapping each other. But everybody was doing their job, I guess. Here is each pedestal, they had to dig a hole, then build a form, and then fill these up with concrete and rocks to set the new bridge on. So it's 84 of those built. So you can see it took some time.
Each of the 21 bents of the trestle has 4 legs.
Yeah,
So there
It
are
was-
4 21 trestles.
that's a close-up picture of the tumbler, I guess you'd say, where the concrete's coming down right and coming out into these barrels or buckets. close-up picture there, building the Titanic. That was hard work right there. And look how nasty that is, down in that water, shoveling all that heavy, wet sand and the old water just running back in the river there. And there's another picture of it, close up. This is evidently the pump hill, this end. Like Lindy Cox standing down. I always thought. You can see those boilers put out some steam. We're getting close here to the end. There was some speculation for a good number of years of what happened to that Titanic barge when they were through. And Bob, I think, they said they probably just cut it loose and floated away and rotted. About, this thing said March the 30th of this year, Ann Woody, who some of y'all know, they lived just beyond, just downstream from the bridge. They didn't uncover this, but they found this right at the edge of their land where it goes into the river. And they think this is the remains of that Titanic that floated several hundred yards down and got hung up on something and laid there and just rotted and went right into the mud. There's a good picture of it. And she kind of insinuated she wished somebody would go there and excavate it to see if it was the Titanic, but I doubt that ever happens. Who knows? Let me see what I was going to do for you.
We could get some of these young folks to do it.
Yeah, I hear you.
Make it a Longwood project.
Let me see. Now I've got time. I've got to find the information for you on the forts. This is pretty much the end of it for the presentation tonight. I don't want to keep everybody too late. We'll finish before 9 o'clock. Anyway, let's get out of this one. I'm going to go into next month's program. And we'll find that stuff about the ports for you here, number 4. Okay, let's see what we can find here. This is what we're going to do next month. Gotta let it load. So many slides, it takes a few minutes to load in here.
While he's doing that, give you a report from John Red's relatives. They were in Hampton, Sydney. When I was at Hampton, Sydney, I worked in the dining hall. Alfred Red was the chief cook, and we lived in Worsham. And Edith Red was one of the workers there in the dining hall. Working in the dining hall, what makes out of tuition, was a benefit. Alfred would always call us back, the ones who worked in the dining hall, when we had steak, and we didn't have steak very often. He would pick out the best steaks, and he said, now, how you want it cooked? So you remember that from college days. And Ethel Red made the best sweet potato pie. There was a room over the dining hall that I used to study in because it was quiet. And Ethel was the last one out of the dining hall. And so she'd come to the bottom steps and say, Scott, there's milk and pie. I'm leaving. And so I asked Ethel, I said, give me the recipe for your sweet potato pie. And I don't know how
she was. She did said, "Oh, your mama knows how to make sweet potato pie." And I said, "She's never made sweet potato pie like this." And she said, "Maybe it's the sweet potatoes. They were white sweet potatoes." So I got them, took them home, and Mother made pie. Mother was good with pastries, candies, and so forth. I told her, "Mama, you can't touch Ethel's sweet potato pie." After graduate school, back at Longwood, went out to, what was it called, Missions then. And I was, I think, selling Lions Club rooms and so forth. And I went by this room, and I thought, I know that person. And it was Ethel. I couldn't believe it. She was the last years. So we visited, talked, and before I left, I said, "You still make the best sweet potato pie." She remembered that.
And they were relatives of the man who was at night watching them.
Yeah. They lived at Worsham. I
Okay.
don't know the relationship with John and Ethel, but when I was on the school board, John was with public school system. He was in charge of the cafeteria there then. So, but they both went to Hampton. That's good.
Good, yeah, it's interesting. Every little bit helps. Yeah, I'm going to show Bill what I have here on the forts. In 1960 and 61, I was living up on 2nd Street, and the two Brooks boys, I showed you their pictures, they were running around for a boy named Mike Petracus. You remember that? His dad? Yeah, his daddy was the manager of the A&P, and they were big into go-karts. And I'd go down there with them, see the go-karts. And all these boys, the Petracus and the two Brooks boys, they were going down the High Bridge every weekend, digging for relics. And Roy Ransom Sr., who owned the Lux Cleaners, that some of you remember, and his son Roy Jr. and I would all get in an old dry cleaning truck, and we'd ride down there and see what the Brooks boys were doing. And they amassed a large pile of stuff, and so much that the father Earl started following their story, and Earl came up to their house, the Petracus house, which was at the top of 2nd Street, right across from where you live, Nancy. And they had piled all this stuff out in the yard. And I was there the day that Earl came and took a bunch of pictures. And I went back and found those Earls from 60 and 61, and I had captured the story of their relic hunting, and it'll come up on next month's program. But let me see if I can show you some good pictures. I wouldn't want to sneak it in, look at it tonight too. Like I said, all this will be on the internet where you, after next month, this will be on the internet and you can go and read it in detail. But the Brooks boys, their granddaddy, remember I showed you, he was on the porch of that commissary. He was one of the contractors there. According to this article in the Herald, it says, Tom picked up some of his relic hunting fever from seeing relics at his grandfather's place. His grandfather was an engineer for the construction of the present High Bridge Railroad crossing, and when in the process of building it, he picked up a collection of cannonballs. So I always have thought Grandpa told those Brooks boys where to dig, which makes sense. And I'm going to show you where they were. This is in the actual Farmville Herald. And for those of you that don't know, all the old Farmville Heralds are now on the internet, and you can go online and search for. You can type in like relic hunters, it'll bring you all the articles that pertain to relic hunters going back to late 1800s. But there's
You can find those newspapers under VirginiaChronicle.com, and it'll list all your papers in Virginia. Just click on the Farmville Herald as period and read your subject.
So here's pictures of the boys down there that Earl took. They're not very good Farm Earl pictures, but what we had in 1960 and 61, you can see they dug a hole big enough, almost dropped a car over in. I figure we're down 20 or 30 feet. But in his time, the folks giving a talk about the relics. He had must have been a gathering down at High Bridge or Sales Creek, and he gave a program. But there's a picture taken on the left there at the Petrarchus house. That's where he and his dad and mom lived. And then here's another picture, ready for centennial spot. They kept going back for the year, the summer of 60 and the summer of 61, basically. And here's a link to all those articles. What you have to do is copy it and then paste it. Well, I don't have the map there, but it's somewhere.